Humans are the only mammals, aside from killer whales, who have menopause. Clearly, there is some value in women who don't reproduce or who are past their reproductive years because there is still a purpose to having them around. So the biological clock is literally a made-up phenomenon, not by some scheming scientist, but by a journalist named Richard Cohen, who published an article in the Washington Post in 1978 called "The Clock is Ticking for the Career Woman." That's where this term came from. So not only is the biological clock a baloney term that is used to weaponize our childbearing abilities against us, but it is also a projection. A projection not only of the envy men have that we have this unearned privilege, but also a projection that janky sperm and the age of the male partner is usually the main culprit when it comes to fertility issues, miscarriages, and chromosomal abnormalities. The only leg up men have is social and political, because they've created that for themselves. Other than that, they have a biological clock and their bodies actually age faster and worse than women's do. So when I tell y'all that everything is based in a projection, you gotta listen to me. You gotta listen to me, because when the revolution comes, you know what, DJ, just cue up the theme song. We'll talk about the revolution soon. Let's go. Clock is ticking. Come on. Hello to all the bad bitches. Welcome to today's episode, which is on a topic that you baddies voted on in my Instagram story a few weeks ago. So, oh my God, I'm so excited to talk about this. When I was doing the research for this episode, I was actually laughing. I'm not even kidding. I can't make this stuff up if I tried. Truly. This is like the opposite of my episode on gossip, because when I was researching for that, I was getting so upset over the violent history of how women were demonized and killed for gossiping that I actually had a headache at one point. Oh my God, I'm so excited to get into this. If you are new here, my name is Nikki. I am your host. I am the baddest bitch in the building, not to be confused with you, who is also the baddest bitch in the building. And what I noticed is that I am basically like a Machiavellian Barbie. Like if Barbie and Machiavelli were to have a kid, it would be me. So my strategies tend to be Machiavellian, but with a feminine twist. And I'm here to teach the girlies that you can act like this and not feel guilty about it, because we cannot play fair in an unfair world. And I think that's what makes this podcast and makes me so iconic, because Barbie was the first ever doll for little girls that wasn't a baby. She was literally an adult doll that showed girls you can do whatever you want and you can be whoever you want. And that was really iconic. And I'm here to do the same iconic shit. So what we're going to do in the next half hour or so is we're going to first unlearn a lot of the crap that we've been taught about our own bodies. And I'm going to share some biological facts, some actual facts, not facts pulled out of Richard Cohen's butt crack. And then we're going to talk about ways to stop letting people live your life for you. Okay? Because I'm not just going to give you facts and be like, here, have a nice day. We're actually going to talk about what this means for us and what our lives can look like if we were to make a few little tweaks and unlearn some of the brainwashing that unfortunately we've been conditioned into. So let's get right into it. The first thing we need to talk about is the projection and the inversion behind this made-up concept of a biological clock. Men, and when I say men, obviously I am not talking about all men, but I am still generalizing because I think that the majority of men tend to think like this. Men see our ability to have babies as an unearned biological advantage. And there's a quote in How to Hack the Patriarchy, my book, which describes this perfectly. Okay, here goes. I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. Okay, sorry. I had to do nonsense. I had to say nonsense, and I had to make fun of myself. Okay, here's the actual quote. Our bodies can create and sustain life, which is something uniquely female. Because many men resent that women have this unearned biological privilege, they've had to resort to creating an unearned privilege of their own, which they codified through moral codes like law and religion. Oh, you can have babies? Fine, then we can have property. You, haha. And that quote describes so perfectly the way that our ability, our gift, has been weaponized against us for millennia. Sure, we're born with a womb. We're born with the ability to create life. I don't think it's unearned because even though I did not necessarily ask to be born and ask to be female, I still have a monthly maintenance that I got to do 400 times over the course of my life so that I can keep my reproductive system up and running. All right? Because having a period and going through the hormonal ups and downs that we have every month is not easy. If you've been hit with one of those booty hole cramps, oh, you've deserved everything good in this world, truly. And I'll actually be doing an episode probably in the next few weeks on how to understand every week of your cycle and how to sync that with your life. But men see this as an unearned privilege, and so they've weaponized it against us because they can't take this away from us. So they've used things like religion to shame women for having periods, to tell women they're spiritually contaminated and dirty if they've given birth, if they've had a daughter, if they're bleeding. And even at the institutional level, they've resorted to taking away women's reproductive rights, like overturning Roe v. Wade. And on the social level, men have resorted to all sorts of tricks, like even impregnating a woman to derail her career or derail wherever she's at in her life, or creating stigmas around women who choose to be child-free. For example, there was a guest on the Diary of a CEO podcast not too long ago. I forget his name, but I saw one of my guests who was on this show last year, Zumi, or Abigail, the girl with the list. She was actually mentioned by that guest on the podcast because that guest was calling her anti-family. He was talking about how women who don't want to have kids are anti-family. I'm like, where did you get this term? Like, literally, what are you barking about? So a lot of that stigma is perpetuated by men. And part of that stigma is the made-up term of the biological clock. And this concept is so dangerous. It's so harmful because it is cloaked in science. Biological clock. You hear that term and you think it is a research-backed concept, when in reality, it was made up by a journalist in a 1978 article for the Washington Post. And I'm going to read to you an excerpt from that article because I suffered reading through this and now I want everybody else to suffer with me. So let me read you an excerpt. All right, here goes. Blah, 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 blah. No, actually, that's what it sounds like. But here's the actual article. I've gone around, a busy bee of a reporter, from woman to woman, the ones in the office and the ones I meet elsewhere. Isn't it interesting, I say, this business about the biological clock? How do you feel about it? Most of them said they can hear the clock ticking. Literally pulling this out of his ass, like you wrote this article to create this term and now you're saying they hear the clock ticking, like shut the fuck up. Some talked about it in a sort of theoretical sense, like the woman who said she wanted 5 children and didn't even have a boyfriend yet. Oh no. She had to get something going, she said, and you can tell that she resented the fact that a deadline had been imposed on her. Yeah, by you, motherfucker. Now, skipping forward a little bit, there was something about their situation that showed, more or less, that this is where liberation ends. This is where a woman is a woman, biologically, physiologically, uncontrovertibly different. Made up word. But there is something else here. Once you recognize the difference, you also have to recognize that the difference produces advantages and handicaps. Little about it is simply neutral. This is important because there is now something in the air about women having won their fight for equality, and even something about how it was always harder to be a man anyway. Who edited this? Okay. But there are some things we never had to worry about, like the ticking of the biological clock. Oh my God, this article, every time I read it, it gets more and more stupid. Like, are you stupid? Are you dumb? So, apparently, being a woman in some ways is a handicap. Well, remember when I said that everything is a projection, especially negativity that people spew out? That is a projection. Well, if you want to talk about handicaps, you want to talk about mothers? You want to talk about handicaps? Okay, we'll talk about handicaps. So, the author of this article, Richard Cohen, unfortunately was a very sick man. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 25. He was legally blind. And after writing this article, he battled 2 bouts of colon cancer. And his biological clock ticked and he passed away in 2024. So if you want to talk about projection, this is as projection as it gets, where he's labeling a natural biological process that women have as a handicap when unfortunately, and I'm not saying this to poke fun at him or to laugh at him, but unfortunately, he was the one who had a handicap. So we have to keep in mind that everything is filtered through someone's bias. Now, I don't know if he wrote this article and was thinking about the fact that he was upset about his own condition and he wanted to project that into his work, but subconsciously, maybe it did. But you know, I like to go and dig deeper than the surface. I'm sure lots of people have talked about this article, but I don't think anyone has gone deeper than just saying, hey, this is a made up term from this article. But that's why I am Machiavellian Barbie, because I'm here to give you the truth and the things that you might not get just by Googling something or by asking ChatGPT, okay? That's why I'm here. At least my job will never be replaced by AI. So that's the projection element of it. The other problematic element is that the biological clock frames fertility as a virtue, and it signals to women that we're only valuable during our reproductive years. Childbearing is a duty, and it's one that you have to do because if you're childless, not to be confused with child free, if you're childless, then there's something wrong with you, and you need to be convinced that you should have kids. You're selfish. And by framing fertility as a virtue and tying morality into it, we're able to have a whole new arsenal of weapons to use against women, like guilt and shame. For example, women who want to be child-free are often told that we are selfish. If you think about it, every single reason to have a kid is selfish. I've always wanted to be a parent. I want to give my child a better life than I had. I've always wanted to have a family. I want a mini me. I want someone to take care of me when I'm older. All of these reasons are selfish. I'm not saying they're inherently wrong, but they are selfish. Now, some of the reasons that I don't want to have kids, for example, I don't think I would be a good mom because I would resent the child for derailing my life. I place a lot of value on my body, and pregnancy scares the crap out of me. And I don't want to deal with the physical trauma of pregnancy and birth and postpartum. I am selfish and I want to live my life for myself. I don't want to share my income. I don't want to share my time. I don't want to clean vomit aside from the cat vomit that I have to clean up every week. We are in a climate crisis and we don't need more people on this earth. And also, speaking of the earth, have you seen the condition of the world? I don't want to bring a person into this. I don't want somebody to live a life on this planet. And the thing is, I can give these reasons and stand by my choice with my chest out and be like, I'm not going to stand for anyone's crap. But a lot of women, when you factor in religion, culture, the ways that we've been groomed since we were little girls to be people pleasers, to be nice girls, and to respond to shame and guilt and internalize that, a lot of women succumb to this pressure. And they think that fertility is a virtue and their duty is to have a child, that they are incomplete without having a kid, that their family is incomplete without having children. But the thing is, humans, like I mentioned, aside from killer whales, humans are the only animals that have menopause. And that is fascinating because most female animals reproduce until they die. Because the whole purpose of being alive from a biological standpoint is to propagate your genes and to survive, have your genes survive. So what is the purpose of getting to a point where you can't spread your genes? There must be some value to a woman who is past her reproductive age. And although the science on this is relatively new and not 100% confirmed, one of the roles of postmenopausal women is to remember, to pass on knowledge and wisdom and experience to younger generations. Because something that your grandma saw and experienced might not occur during your life, but she has that knowledge that she can pass on to you. She has that wisdom. And oftentimes people and scientists think that the role of grandmothers is for childcare, when even research with orcas, those killer whales, has shown that when the food supply is low, the older females lead the pod to places that are more likely to have food. And they also demonstrate to the pod how to get to that food. So clearly there is a role beyond childcare for postmenopausal women, because women are keepers of wisdom and knowledge. And on a related note, a lot of the way that we think about fertility places the burden on women. And women are usually the ones who are blamed for fertility issues. Men take credit for the end product. Oh, she's carrying my baby, but never for the role that they have to play in something that might go wrong. But hold on to that thought, because I'm going to get into the whole biological side of this in a few minutes. But what's important to remember right now is that the biological aspect of having kids has been weaponized against women for millennia. And the concept of a biological clock has been used to groom women to feel a sense of urgency. It's used to pressure women and make them feel guilty and make them feel selfish for doing what they want on their terms. And instead, it causes them to hurry and put things aside so that they can fulfill their obligation, their moral duty as somebody to have kids to carry on the next generation. And with that, let's shift our focus now to the biological facts. Let's get the facts straight so that we can debunk these myths and put all this garbage to rest once and for all. Sperm are basically an information delivery system that dumps the father's DNA into the egg, whereas eggs have to provide all the construction materials to build that embryo. And that's the major reason eggs are about 4,000 times larger than sperm. They're not just half a set of blueprints, they're half a set of blueprints plus the entire factory. And that, ladies and ladies, is why the egg is actually the biggest cell in the human body and the sperm is the smallest. Listen, I can't make this stuff up even if I tried. Now, like I mentioned, females are born with about 1 to 2 million eggs. By the time we get to puberty, around 8 to 13 years old, we have around 300 to 500,000 eggs. And by age 37, we have about 25,000 eggs. Now, the first myth here is quantity over quality. What happens during ovulation is that a handful of egg follicles are released and they compete with each other to see who gets picked, literally biological pick-me's. And your body will choose one high-quality egg from that handful. It will mature, and that will be the egg that's released during ovulation. And the average woman has about 400 periods throughout her life, which means that from the 1 to 2 million eggs you were born with, your body will pick 400 of the highest quality eggs from that 1 to 2 million and release those to potentially become a person. So the concept of the biological clock is based on this narrative that women's eggs tend to decrease over time, which in itself is not incorrect. Your egg count does decrease throughout your life, but it completely ignores the fact that your reproductive system is literally programmed to choose the highest quality eggs. So with women, it truly is quality over quantity. The quantity over quality way is for males because that's how sperm operates. Every part of your reproductive system is built for high quality. Okay? For example, during ovulation, the positioning of your cervix is higher and the consistency of your cervical fluid is different to help guide the sperm to the egg. Bless their hearts, these little sperm, they need all the help they can get. And with the help of that cervical fluid, which is the consistency of egg whites, sperm can live up to 5 days. Whereas the egg, she only hangs around for about 24 hours and then she's done. So the sperm are like, please pick me, ma'am, please, ma'am. May I have a fertilization? So get this whole quantity over quality line of thinking out of your head. Of course, the highest chance of someone getting pregnant is at around 18 to 24 years old, literally a teen mom. But in your 30s, you still have high quality eggs, and your likelihood to get pregnant does decrease, but it is still very possible and it does not decrease as much as we are thought to believe, which leads me to the next myth, which is that fertility rapidly decreases after the age of 35. I don't know why there's always it's always a multiple of 5 or 10. Like it has to be 30, 35, 40. It can never be like, oh, fertility decreases at age 38. No, it is 35. Actually, it's not. Now, you might have heard a statistic that 1 in 3 women between the ages of 35 and 39 will not get pregnant after a year of trying. Do you know where that stat is from? It is based on French birth records from 1670 to 1830. I can't make this shit up. I cannot make this up if I tried. So women are being fed propaganda and are building their lives around that propaganda from stats that originated 200 plus years ago. Right? Don't piss me off. Now, to cite a study that was done in this century, in 2013, there was a study reported in the journal Fertility and Sterility of almost 3,000 Danish women who were followed by the researchers as they tried to get pregnant. I mean, not followed, but they reported back on what they were doing. And this study found that when those women had sex during their fertile times, aka when they were ovulating, 78% of the 35 to 40-year-olds got pregnant within a year. And 84% of 20 to 34-year-olds were also able to get pregnant within that year of trying. So 78%, 84%, not that much different. Of course, this is one study done on Danish women, so your lifestyle, your ethnicity, your race, all of that plays a role. But there are quite a few studies that have been conducted showing that women over 35 can still get pregnant and with a similar level of likelihood as women who are in their earlier 30s or late 20s. Now, the kicker comes at around age 40. That's when the chance of getting pregnant drops to about 5 to 10% per menstrual cycle, as compared to about 20% at age 30. So it does drop off, but it's not like it is completely impossible. And I should mention that the research and the data for women getting pregnant after age 40 is not that great. So hopefully in the coming years, we get more information and data on this. But something that the research has found is that the chance of chromosomal abnormalities at the age of 20 is about 1 in 500. And then it increases to 1 in 400 at age 30, and then 1 in 60 to 70 at age 40. So obviously, I don't want to downplay that there are risks for women who want to get pregnant closer to perimenopause. But again, those risks are greatly exaggerated and used as a form of propaganda to make women rush and get pregnant sooner. It bears mentioning that obviously the closer a woman gets to menopause, the higher the likelihood of miscarriages, pregnancy complications, and chromosomal abnormalities, not to mention that pregnancy and birth are potentially life-threatening events that turn out better, usually for healthier, younger women. But I'm just thinking out loud here. There have been multiple women in my family who've had babies over the age of 40, and everyone turned out fine. I mean, this is anecdotal evidence. But like I said, these random numbers, 35, 40, these are just random numbers that somewhat coincide with women's career progression that are used to pressure and shame women into putting their careers aside and hopefully getting lost in motherhood. Now, speaking of complications, another myth is that most fertility problems have to do with a woman's age. This is a load of baloney. Research has found that men have a biological clock, and that clock starts ticking very loudly at around age 40. In fact, poor sperm quality is responsible for most chromosomal abnormalities, miscarriages, and other fertility issues. So, like I said, everything is a projection, including fertility issues, which are constantly blamed on women. In fact, a recent study found that conception during a 12-month period was 30% less likely for men over age 40 as compared with men younger than age 30. Another study, this was a French study, examined 901 cycles of intrauterine artificial insemination. They found that the most significant factor contributing to probability of pregnancy was the age of the male partner. After 6 cycles, men aged 35 and above had fertility rates of 25% compared with fertility rates of 52% in men aged under 35 years, representing a 52% decrease in fertility rates. This is an excerpt from that article. I'll link all my sources in the show notes. But remember that study that I cited? How women between 35 and 40 were 78% likely to get pregnant, and then the women 20 to 34 were 84% likely? So the difference was only 6 percentage points? Here, we're looking at a difference of almost 30 percentage points. And just doing some mental math, that's a difference of what, about 10%, a 10% decrease in fertility rate? But for men over 35, there's a 52% decrease in fertility rates. That's insane. Obviously, this is one study, and again, lifestyle, race, ethnicity, health, all of that plays a role. But that is a really big finding. So if anyone has a biological clock, which starts to tick at apparently 35, it's the menfolk. So with all these biological facts in our brains now, let's talk about what to actually do with all of this information. Most of us are way more gullible than we care to admit. We are all extremely gullible. And like I mentioned in my girly law of power number 30, use people's big egos to your advantage, we need to get in the habit of seeing past the mask. When we take things at face value, it's the same as taking things personally. In both of those cases, we're taking responsibility for someone else's deficiencies. With the biological clock, women have taken responsibility for men's biological deficiencies. And even in that article written by Michael Cohen, if he was in fact projecting his own poor health onto women and calling women handicapped because they have this biological clock, this window of fertility, then again, we've taken responsibility for someone else's issues. So get in the habit of seeing what's right beneath the surface. You don't have to dig that deep. Usually it's just an inversion. You know when you were a kid and you'd pretend it's opposite day? Well, in the adult world, every day is opposite day. And it is especially true when someone is pressuring you into doing something, especially doing something that doesn't involve them. When someone sticks their nose where it doesn't belong, ask yourself, what are they lacking? And this might be your parents. This might be your family. We tend to be blinded when it's people close to us, especially when it's our parents and our family, because we always think that they have our best intentions at heart. When in reality, they can, and I hope they do, but in reality, a lot of that is muddied with their own projections. When you have parents putting pressure on you to give them grandkids, or people being really judgmental about your choice not to have kids or to delay having kids until later in your life. You know, it can be somebody in your family. It can be freaking Joe Prosciutto on the street. But remember, always ask yourself, what are they lacking? What are they projecting onto me? A lot of the women and unfortunately it's been mostly women who've been very judgmental towards my choice of not having kids, they all gaslight me and they say, oh, well, you're going to change your mind, as if I'm too stupid to have an opinion at this point in my life. But a lot of those women probably regret having kids. A lot of those women think that, well, because I made this bad decision and I'm suffering, other people should suffer too. Just like how I read that butt crack article and then I read it for you ladies because I'm like, I don't want to be the only one who read this garbage and we're all going to suffer together. A lot of women are doing that, but with your choices, pressuring you, gaslighting you, making you feel shame and guilt so that you can take responsibility for their deficiencies. How backwards is that? And whether we like to admit it or not, a lot of people have an agenda. They do. So be very aware of people who stick their nose where it doesn't belong, and also people who try to pressure you and put you in a hurry. We live in a world of rushing and hurrying and pressure. Think about the last time you tried to book a hotel room or book a flight. Miraculously, there's always only one room left or only one seat left on the flight. And then you come back the next day and that one room is still left. 2 weeks later, you come back, that one seat is still left. Or in the corporate world where I used to work, deadlines, made up deadlines. Everybody was always in a hurry. Everything had a very tight timeline. Why? Because you can churn out projects faster to take on more work and make more money for the shareholders. And remember, those deadlines were made up. So be very aware and wary of people who try to put you in a hurry when you initially had no hurry to begin with. You were just chilling. And the last thing I'll say is don't be afraid to lie, either outright or by omission. If you feel uncomfortable with this, listen to my girly love power number 10. Be selective with who you give your truth. Not everyone deserves to know everything about you. Actually, no one deserves to know everything about you, but most people aren't even going to deserve to know most things about you or some things about you. So you have to categorize people based on what they'll do with your truth. I'll read an excerpt from my book on Hack 10 or Girly Love Power number 10. There are 4 types of people, okay, when it comes to your truth. Number 1, people who weaponize your truth against you. Number 2, people who use your truth to categorize you. Number 3, people who use your truth to fill a void in themselves. This is likely a lot of the people who will gaslight you for your choice to be child-free or your choice to have kids later on in life. And number 4, people who use your truth to support you. So those are the 4 types of categories I like to think about when discussing who deserves your truth. And those people in categories 1 to 3 are either going to get no truth or they're going to get strategic half-truths. Okay? Remember that you're not doing anything wrong because by giving them your truth, you are actually going to put yourself at a disadvantage because most people don't even want the truth. They want what they can do with the truth. Hold it over you, pressure you, shame you, guilt you. So don't feel guilty about withholding your truth, giving half-truths, or giving a flat-out lie when you need to. They don't call me Machiavellian Barbie for nothing. Because most of the time, people are sticking their nose where it doesn't belong so they can feel better about themselves. Or if they're victimellas or victimellos, they're trying to feel worse about themselves. Imagine letting someone who is not going to raise your children for you decide whether you have them or not. What a stupid decision. What a stupid way to go about your life. No one is going to live your life for you. Not your parents, not your siblings, not your best friend, not your close friends, not your neighbor, not your high school English teacher, no one. No one. So the only person who is allowed to make decisions is you. You are the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, the board of directors, the shareholders. You are everything. You are the one who makes the decisions. Do not let anyone take that away from you because no one can take your decision-making powers away from you without your consent. And sometimes they'll brainwash you, they'll pressure you, they'll shame and guilt you to put you in a trance so that you can give your consent without really knowing what you're getting yourself into. But now that you've listened to this episode, you know better. All right, baddies. With that, I'm going to close the episode here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any building that you step foot in. In the meantime, stay bad. Love you. Bye. Thank you to all the baddies who are supporting on Patreon. Shout out to Kate, Danny, Adriana, Mina, Gemma, Priya, Katya, Melissa, May, Naomi, Nilufar, Adelaide, Nadia, Faith, Amy, Simran, Melinda, Sophia M, Sophia K, Jada, Yael, Roselle, Amara, Kat, Delia, and May. Thank you all so much.